Hi book lovers, it's Jenny at Julia Baby Jen, and today I am doing my January monthly recommends. Okay, so this month's theme is historical fiction, and I've decided to go ahead and focus on a specific time period for this video because I have so much historical fiction I love. I'm really big into it. I've read historical fiction my whole life and I just adore it. So I decided I was going to stick with World War II for this video because that really narrowed my books down, and some of my favorites are during that time period. I tend to read a lot of World War II books, so I thought I would recommend some of those. I actually narrowed it down, I think, to 10, but my list started at like 30 for World War II historical fiction. So there's quite a few books I've read that I would recommend, but I decided to go with my very top picks, and that's what we're going to do right now. Monthly Recommends is a Goodreads group, and every month there is a topic that you can make a video for or do a blog post or whatever you use for your social media. It is run by Kayla Rain and Trina from Between Chapters, and I'll link their channels below and the Goodreads group below in the description box if you'd like to check it out. February's theme is going to be OTP, so your one true pairing. And you can, the nice thing I love about these topics is you can do it however you'd like to. If you want to make a top 10, that's great. You can pick 5, you can do it however you want to do it. So it's not strict at all, it's just a lot of fun, and it's a great way to get some recommends. Alright, I've watched a ton of these all months. Mine's a little bit later. This is the very last of the month actually, just because I've been so busy with other projects, but finally getting this done. My first pick, which I think a lot of people, I've seen it in a lot of people's videos, and it's one of the favorite historical fiction books out there, is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. This is an amazing read. It's very unique and incredibly well written. The thing I love best about this book is the narrator is death itself, and it humanizes death and it humanizes humans in a way. He's just fascinated by humans, the narrator of death, and he's very fascinated by this girl named Liesel, who is the main character for The Book Thief. She actually is the book thief, and she steals books throughout her life for different reasons, but all of them very noble. And it's an amazing story because it's oh gosh, I don't know how to describe it. It's just amazing because it showcases the love of reading, the love of books, the love of family, and then of course it's against this horrible backdrop of World War II. This takes place in Germany, and Liesel and her family are actually hiding a Jew in their basement, Max, who is a young man, I think about 20 is his age. And so there's that whole factor to the story as well. And it's sort of Max and Liesel's story and how it intertwines through their lives. And there's other wonderful characters in this. It is just one of the best books I've ever read, and if you have never read The Book Thief, I think it's one of those must-read books. Not everybody loves it, but if you can get used to the tone and the narrator, it's a little slow at first, but once you get into it, it is so good, and be ready for Kleenex at the end. Looking at all my books, they're all a little bit sad, because it is World War II. I mean, there just aren't that many happy stories during World War II. My next pick is Salt to the Sea by Ruta Sepetys. This is a fairly new book. Ruta is an amazing historical fiction author. This is my second book of hers that I've read. She's written 3. And Between Shades of Grey also takes place during World War II. Out of the Easy, which I've read, which is amazing too, takes place in the 1950s in New Orleans. This particular one is a really interesting story. It follows an event, well, the whole conclusion of it is this huge maritime disaster, this event that I knew nothing about. I don't think very many people do know about. It's one of the worst tragedies in history, and no one really knows about it. So that in itself is an amazing read. But leading up to that is awesome too. We're following 4 main characters in this. They're all teenagers, and we flip back and forth between their points of view. They do not know each other, but their stories all connect at the end. And they're all have something to hide. They all have secrets. They're more sympathetic than others, but the chapters to these are really, really short. Like, it's a really short chapter, and then you're on to the next character, and it makes you want to keep reading. It's really hard to put this book down. It's a heartbreaking book, but it's an amazing, amazing read. I've only heard amazing things about it from others as well, so this one is definitely worth checking out. The Bronze Horseman by Paulina Simons. This is actually a romance, adult romance story set against the backdrop of World War II. So you probably wouldn't like it at all if you don't like romance. So that I'm going to tell you right away. But if you like romance at all, this is definitely worth reading. My favorite part about it was not the romance, although I thought the romance was definitely worth reading and was a good romance to read. I loved the whole setting, and I loved the main character, this Tatiana. She is an amazing girl, very strong character, and I just really loved her. This takes place in Leningrad during the siege of Leningrad in World War II. So this takes place in Russia. And to be honest, I don't know a lot about Russia in World War II other than what it was doing in Europe, but I don't know like what happened there as much. This taught me a lot. There's been a few other books I've read that have taught me a lot about Russia during World War II as well. And I almost think Russia was harder hit than anywhere else in the world during World War II. And it's amazing that it's not talked about more than it is. And I'm sure that's because of the Cold War relations. We're not supposed to sympathize with Russia at all. But I do, because these are people just like you and me. It's not their fault if their government does dumb things, just like in Germany. I mean, I don't blame every German for the Nazi, for the Holocaust. I mean, obviously, I would assume that as a people, they're not evil. It just takes a few corrupt people to anyway, that's another topic. But anyway. This is an amazing story. It is very bleak, very horrific, but also very uplifting because Tatiana never gives up. And it's amazing the things she does to save Alexander, her love, and to, well, mainly to help other people. She doesn't think about herself hardly at all through this, and it comes across. She's always the one who's being beaten down, and it's just an amazing story. I really like this. This is a trilogy, and I need to read the next two books. But this one, even though it's a big, fat romance, it's an amazing read. In the Garden of Beasts by Erik Larson. So this is In the Garden of Beasts, Love, Terror, and American Family in Hitler's Berlin. So that right there sold me. I love Erik Larson. I think this was my very first Erik Larson book I read though. And it was really good. I was really shocked how much I loved this. This is nonfiction, so I guess it doesn't really fit into historical fiction, but it reads a lot like a novel. So that's where I think you can stick it in historical fiction, even though it is nonfiction really. It's about a true family. It's fictionalized in some ways through conversation and things like that. Even though it's meticulously researched, it reads like a novel. So it's definitely worth reading. They are making this into a movie with Tom Hanks. So that right there might pique your interest a little bit. So this takes place in Berlin in 1933, and this follows Ambassador Dodd and his family. Ambassador, he works as a professor, and he becomes a U.S. ambassador in Berlin kind of because nobody else wants the job, and he kind of just ends up with it. And he's all excited to spend a year in Berlin with his family. His children are grown, early 20s, so his son, his daughter, and his wife and him all end up in Berlin in 1933. And from there, it's an amazing, amazing story. They become involved in all the politics, involved in all the rich families in Berlin, and slowly they start to realize how wrong everything is in this city. And Ambassador Dodd writes letter after letter back to America to try to get attention that things are not going well in Berlin at all, and this is not going to be good, and he's basically ignored. So it's kind of that that foreshadowing, that whole someone did see it coming but was completely ignored, and I think those stories are always interesting. So yeah, it's really interesting. I really don't know a lot about 1930s Germany before World War II hit. I know some of like the political moves, but I don't know a lot about what it was like to live there. And this really shows you what it was like to live in Berlin in 1933. And it's chilling. I'll put it that way. So this was a really good read. Codename Verity by Elizabeth Wein. This is an amazing, amazing read, and I need to read her other book, Rose Under Fire, because it's kind of like a sequel to this. This takes place in Nazi-occupied France, and it follows two girls who are about 18 years old and are from England, and the two girls are best friend, and one is a pilot, and she has been captured by the Nazis, and she is under torture to reveal what she knows about. So basically, they're torturing her for, you know, she's basically a spy, and so it's the first half of the book is told from her point of view, and then the second half of the book is told from her friend's point of view, what they're doing to try to save her and get her out of this prison, and it's even though it's very horrific when you think about it. She writes the point of view of the main character is very interesting because she doesn't really tell you. She's more of a sarcastic humor, and you just kind of have to guess exactly how bad she's being treated because she doesn't flat out say it. A lot of this is letters that she's written as well, so there's a lot of code in there. So it all makes sense at the end, but it's an amazing story. You won't be able to put it down, and oh, yeah, really good. Prisoner of Night and Fog by Anne Blankman, and then also the sequel, can't think of a sequel name right now, but this is a duology, and this is the first book. This is also a Germany story. This is actually the events. This is also right before World War II takes place. It is historical fiction, but it's based on a girl that was friends with Hitler, basically. And there's, of course, a lot of the characters are real-life characters in history, but a lot of it is guessed at. Basically, the main character in this, she is a family friend of Hitler. Her dad was his best friend, and her dad is now dead. And so she's in the inner circle, and it's sort of her realizing what's really going on, and things are not as what she thought they were. And Uncle Dolph isn't what he says he is. And it's also really interesting. Psychological analysis into Hitler himself and the psychopath he really was and what a psychopath is. This girl learns a lot about that through the course of the story. So it's a really interesting, kind of enlightening read. I really liked it. Now we'll go with a little bit lighter read. This is The Last Days of Summer by Steve Kluger. This one is a really fun read. This takes place in America, actually New York City, right around the time of World War II, obviously. It follows this kid who is scrappy. His name is Joey, and he's fatherless and basically a little bit in trouble all the time, but he's hilariously funny about it. He's a total goofball. And he is a major fan of Charlie Banks, who plays third baseman for the New York Giants. Gets into trouble, and so he writes Charlie, and basically he starts up a correspondence with him, and Charlie at first wants nothing to do with this kid, who is telling outrageous lies in his letters and things like that. But over time, they develop kind of a friendship through their letters. So it's their story of this kid and this famous ball player in the 1940s. The really interesting thing about this is it's told all throughout. It's not an actual written story. It's told with documents. So most of it's letters. There's postcards. There's Joey's report cards thrown in. Different things like that. So it's all documents and things, and it makes a complete story. So it kind of reminds me a little bit of Illuminae and Gemini as far as the format. It's a lot like that, except obviously this is not futuristic. So this is all old-fashioned type of letters and things like that. But it's an amazing story. The end will make you cry, and it's just hilariously funny. It's one of the funniest books I've ever read. And if you want a light, funny historical fiction read, this is definitely the one I would pick. The Reader by Bernard Schlink. This is a pretty famous book. This was an Oprah book, and it was made into a movie, which I have not seen. But I did read this years and years ago as an Oprah book, so it's been a long time since I've read it, but it does stand out in my brain as a book that I will always remember because it's so interesting. The voice we're hearing from this is this guy named Michael, and when he was 15, he found this woman named Hannah, who was much older than he was, and they became lovers. It was like his first lover and things, and then they drifted off, or she left. I can't remember exactly what happened to the relationship, but then years later, he is an attorney, and she is up. She has been accused of being one of the guards that was involved in the Holocaust. And what she did was atrocious. So she is on trial, and it's all about the story basically of Hannah, and you realize that things are not always as they seem, and it's just a really interesting kind of a commentary on a lot of different things. It's really hard to describe without giving everything away, but it's an amazing read. I think it's really good for people who like a good twist. You will really like this book. And now I have a little bit of a lighter read, Snow Treasure by Marie McSwiggan. This is supposed to be based on a true story, although this is a fiction account of it. This is actually a children's book, kind of an MG book, basically, that I read when I was in school, and it stuck in my head forever. I have never forgotten this story because I think it's so interesting. And whether it's true or not, it's a really amazing story, although a lot of people do think that it is a true story. And basically this takes place in Norway during World War II, and they're trying to get the Norway treasure out of the country under the noses of the Nazis, and they use children to do it. I'm not going to tell you any more than that, but it's a really quick, fun read, and I really recommend it. It will really make you look at a lot of different things differently, and it's fun to read no matter whether you're an adult or a kid. So this is a really good read. My last recommend is probably the saddest book in this stack, and this actually is another one that's not really fiction. It's just more historical. It's a memoir, actually. But it's one of those I think everybody should read, even though it's a little bit hard to get through because it's so gut-wrenching. But I think everybody should read it because I think it's something that we all need to understand how truly terrible the Holocaust was. So I think it's really worthwhile to read, even though it is hard to read. And that is Night by Elie Wiesel. And he actually died not too long ago, which is really sad. But this is his account, basically, of being in the Holocaust, from the point of him when his family and everybody in their village were taken from their homes and put on the trains to Auschwitz. And he actually was in Auschwitz. And he survived it, and he lived a long life, and he spent most of his life trying to educate people on the Holocaust and going around and speaking to people. And I think he was a brave, brave man to have done this, especially when you read his account, because it's just heart-wrenching. But again, I think it's one that is definitely worth reading. It's not a very long book, but it will stick with you for a really long time, and you will never look at the Holocaust exactly the same again. But yes, it's definitely a worthwhile read, even though it's a really sad one. And that is my January monthly recommends. Leave me comments below if you have any good historical fiction to recommend me. If I haven't read it, I will definitely probably try. I've read a lot, but there's still tons out there that I haven't read. I hope everyone has a good day, and I will talk to you later. Bye.